What prison food really looks like inside U.S. Supermax facilities. Before we dive in, hit subscribe if you want more real stories from the darkest corners of the justice system. The ones they don't want you to hear. The ones that stay with you long after the video ends. The story begins on a cold November morning, just outside Florence, Colorado. A Department of Justice response team rushed through the gates of ADX Florence, the most secure Supermax prison in the United States, after a routine kitchen audit triggered a red-level alert. At first, no one understood why a simple food inspection had escalated into a full-blown emergency. But by the time the team reached the kitchen block, one thing was clear. Something had gone terribly wrong. Steel doors slammed open as investigators entered the food prep corridor. The lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across stainless steel counters and industrial freezers. The kitchen was silent, too silent for a space that normally buzzed with inmate workers preparing breakfast. Trays of untouched food sat on the line: scrambled eggs, packets of oatmeal, slices of processed fruit, and the ever-present bland toast. Nothing was burned, broken, or out of place. Except for one thing. A single tray lay overturned in the center of the floor. And next to it was an inmate, unconscious, his hands trembling, lips pale, breath shallow. His ID badge read, Marcus Hale. A long-term inmate serving federal time for organized financial crimes. No history of violence. No medical alerts. No disciplinary infractions. This was not someone expected to collapse in the middle of the kitchen. Captain Rivera, one of the prison's senior officers, scanned the scene. "Lock down the wing," she ordered. And someone pulled the kitchen logs for the last 48 hours. Medics arrived and carried Hale out, but the tension only grew. Because just when officers thought the situation couldn't get stranger, they discovered something else. Something hidden beneath one of the stainless steel prep stations. A folded piece of cardboard, wedged deep into the metal frame. Rivera slid on gloves and retrieved it. The cardboard was stained with oil and faint traces of tomato sauce, likely from the pasta served the night before. On the inside, someone had written a message. The handwriting was small, uneven, rushed. "It's in the food. Check the trays." The staff exchanged uneasy glances. ADX Florence served meals under some of the highest security standards in the country. Ingredients were inventoried, utensils counted, waste logged. Even simple salt packets were monitored. The idea that something had gotten into the food seemed impossible. But they had an unconscious inmate on the floor and a warning note that suggested the collapse was an accident. As Rivera read the message again, her hand tightened around the cardboard. "Get the warden," she said. "Now." Within minutes, Warden Daniels stepped into the kitchen with 2 federal inspectors. They began checking trays, opening warmers, pulling ingredient logs, and reviewing camera footage from the night shift. Nothing looked tampered with. Nothing smelled strange. Nothing appeared contaminated. But then one of the inspectors, a quiet man named Rourke, stopped at a corner prep station. He lifted a stack of trays and frowned. "These don't match," he said. Rivera approached. "How so?" "Look at the serial stamps," Rourke replied. "These trays are from a discontinued batch. They shouldn't be in circulation." A cold silence fell over the room. ADX Florence did not misplace equipment. Not trays, not utensils, not anything. Every object was counted and locked away. If these trays didn't belong here, someone brought them in. Rivera's voice lowered. "Where did they come from?" Rourke shook his head. "That's the wrong question." Rivera stared at him. "Then what's the right one?" Rourke set the tray down carefully. "Who put them here?" And in that moment, everything changed. Because the next discovery would expose a secret buried deep inside the Supermax, one tied to food contraband, and a hidden network operating right under the government's nose. The investigation escalated faster than anyone inside ADX Florence anticipated. Within an hour of discovering the mismatched food trays, the kitchen was sealed, staff were pulled for questioning, and every inmate who had eaten breakfast was placed under medical observation. But even with those precautions, a sense of quiet panic moved through the prison like a cold draft. Warden Daniels ordered an emergency inspection of all kitchen storage. Officers opened crates, freezer units, and sealed ingredient barrels. Nothing appeared tainted. Nothing looked manipulated. Yet the presence of unauthorized trays meant someone had bypassed multiple layers of security, something considered nearly impossible inside a federal Supermax. Captain Rivera stood with Inspector Rourke as they reviewed surveillance feeds. Screens flickered with hours of footage. Inmate kitchen workers chopping vegetables. Guards supervising, trays being stacked, meals being portioned. All routine. All ordinary. Until Rourke paused the feed. "Go back 5 seconds," he said. Rivera rewound the footage. Rourke leaned closer to the monitor, tapping the screen with the end of his pen. "There." At 2:13 a.m., during the overnight cleaning shift, a shadow moved across the far corner of the kitchen, an area not normally used after hours. The figure didn't appear on the next camera angle, as if positioned in the dead zone between lenses. "Who is that?" Rivera asked. The timestamp showed the kitchen should have been empty, except for 2 officers. Both of them were accounted for at the opposite end of the hallway during that same moment. Rourke exhaled slowly. Someone found a blind spot. Before they could analyze the next angle, a knock sounded on the metal door. Medical Officer Hanley entered, his expression tense. "We need you too in the infirmary," he said. "It's Hale." They followed him through a maze of corridors until they reached the medical wing. Hale lay on a bed, pale but conscious now, his wrist cuffed to the frame. His eyes shifted nervously as the investigators approached. Rivera spoke first. "Mr. Hale, you collapsed in the kitchen. Do you know why?" Hale swallowed hard. I didn't mean to get involved. I just saw something I shouldn't have." "What did you see?" Rourke asked. Hale looked toward the door, as if afraid someone might be listening. "The trays. 2 nights ago. They weren't from here. Someone switched them out." "Who?" Rivera pressed. Hale shook his head. "I never saw his face. But he wasn't an inmate. He moved like staff, but he avoided everyone. No uniform. No ID." Rourke and Rivera exchanged looks. An unauthorized person inside a Supermax kitchen was an immediate federal emergency. "What's in the trays?" Rivera asked. Hale hesitated, his voice dropping to a whisper. "A message. Something hidden. I didn't see it, but I heard 2 inmates talking in the yard. They said whoever controls the food controls everything." Rourke's jaw tightened. "What does that mean?" Hale stared at the ceiling. "Supplies. Favors. Contraband. If someone can slip items in through the kitchen, they can run an operation without anyone noticing." Rivera stepped closer. "And the note? The one we found under the counter?" Hale's breathing quickened. "I wrote it. I didn't want anyone else to get hurt." "Hurt by what?" Rivera asked. Hale closed his eyes. "Not poison. Not drugs. Something worse. Something they're smuggling in using the trays." Before Rivera could ask another question, an alarm sounded, sharp, echoing, urgent. The lights flashed red, and an automated voice filled the hall. "Security breach. Cell Block D. All personnel respond." Rourke stiffened. "Cell Block D holds the kitchen workers." Rivera grabbed her radio. "We need to move." As they ran toward the cell block, officers shouted, keys rattled, and reinforced doors slammed open and shut. When Rivera and Rourke reached the unit, they found 3 guards standing outside a cell, their faces pale. "What happened?" Rivera demanded. One of the guards pointed inside. "Ma'am, you need to see this." Rivera stepped into the cell and froze. Inside, spread across the inmate's mattress, were several dismantled food trays, the same discontinued type they had found in the kitchen. But this time, the trays were open, revealing hidden compartments carved into the plastic. And inside those compartments lay something no one expected: a stack of sealed microdrives, devices that had no business being inside the nation's most secure prison. Rivera stared at the microdrives glowing faintly under the harsh cell lights. Each one was sealed, professionally packaged, and marked with tiny serial labels scraped off just enough to hide their origin. These weren't scraps brought in by desperate inmates. These were deliberate, calculated drops. Rourke lifted one carefully. These are government grade, he said. Encrypted storage devices. The kind used for sensitive data transfers. Rivera's stomach tightened. What would something like this be doing inside ADX Florence? Before he could answer, the inmate assigned to the cell, Elias Marrow, was brought in under heavy restraint. Marrow was known for one thing: information. He was a former systems analyst serving 30 years for facilitating cybercrimes tied to international networks. Not violent, not defiant, but dangerous in his own way. Rivera stepped closer. Marrow, we found these in your cell. Explain. Marrow's eyes flicked to the microdrives. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. A tightening of his shoulders, a subtle shift. You brought them in, Rourke said. Or someone put them here for you. Marrow finally spoke, his voice calm. I didn't ask for any of this. Rivera crossed her arms. We're past games. These devices breached federal security. You're going to tell us how. Marrow looked directly at her. I'll tell you what I know, but you won't like the answer. He sat down slowly, chains clinking. The trays weren't used to smuggle in drugs or weapons. Whoever did this is smarter than that. They used food service to pass information. Rourke frowned. Information for who? Marrow exhaled. People on the outside and people on the inside. Individuals with power, not inmates. Rivera leaned closer. Are you saying someone inside this prison is involved? Marrow's silence said everything. Before they could press further, Rourke's radio crackled. All units, report. Unidentified personnel spotted near Sector B service tunnel. Suspected breach point. Rivera didn't hesitate. Move. They rushed through narrow hallways until they reached the service tunnel, one rarely used, accessible only with dual authorization. Officers stood ready, weapons drawn but lowered. The tunnel lights flickered overhead, casting sharp shadows on the concrete floor. Rourke pointed to the far wall. There. Storage hatch. The hatch hung open by an inch. Rivera signaled the guards. Two of them swung the hatch open. Inside, the space was pitch black. A moment later, Rourke's flashlight cut through the darkness. A person stood in the corner. A staff member. Uniform shirt. No name tag. No ID. His hands lifted slowly. Don't shoot. Rivera stepped forward. Identify yourself. The man looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes. Sweat on his forehead. My name is Andrew Klein. Contract maintenance. I need protection. Rourke stiffened. You're not on today's roster. Because I haven't been on the roster in weeks, Klein said. They wiped me from the system. Who did? Rivera demanded. Klein swallowed hard. The people smuggling in the drives. They're using kitchen equipment shipments. Not inmates. Not outsiders. Staff. Senior staff. Silence locked around them. Klein continued. They forced me to help reroute the trays. Said if I didn't, they'd blame it on me. The drives contained data, evidence of corruption, financial transfers, communications. Everything needed to expose the ring. Rivera eyed him sharply. Why hide in the trays? Because no one checks discontinued inventory, Klein whispered. Not if it's moved through the right hands. Rourke lifted a microdrive. What's on here? Klein's voice cracked. Proof. Names. Transactions. Even surveillance footage they buried. Rivera's breath caught. Who's behind it? Klein hesitated. Then he whispered a name that made the entire tunnel go still. Warden Daniels. Rourke froze. Rivera's heart thudded. Klein continued, trembling. He's been running a network from inside the prison, using food shipments and kitchen access to move information. Those drives contain records he thought were destroyed. Rivera stepped back, the weight of the revelation settling like concrete. If this is true, we're dealing with a federal-level conspiracy. Klein nodded. And he already knows you found the trays. Almost on cue, the facility lights shut off. A heavy clang echoed through the prison, followed by lockdown alarms. Rourke whispered, he's sealing the facility. Rivera steadied herself. Not to stop us. To stop the evidence from getting out. In the pitch-black tunnel, surrounded by concrete and betrayal, The truth became painfully clear. This wasn't just corruption. It was a cover-up designed to survive at any cost. And as the emergency shutters slammed into place, Rivera whispered the only words that fit the moment. "This isn't about prison food. This is about control." Then the final alarm sounded, a deep, resonant tone that meant only one thing. The warden was coming.